Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, the weekly show that looks at all aspects of the paranormal and anomalous world. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me, as he does every week, is paranormal researcher and investigator Steve Mera. Now, Steve, I suspect this week's show is going to be a real thought-provoking one. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really well, and it's an absolute pleasure to have my good friend Barry Fitzgerald on. I mean, that's a double whammy, isn't it? And it's I've worked with a lot of people over 41 years. I can say, no, I haven't come across many as switched on as Barry has. And it was quite a pleasure to when I first started working with him to sort of think, okay, this guy thinks like me. There isn't many people that do that. And then I thought to myself, okay, well, what's really interesting is that Barry's work and my work, and we've both been doing this a very, very long time, too long to actually bring up those years, Barry. That we kind of comes to the same conclusion, though we kind of went into it from two different paths. So I kind of ended up where I was, and Barry's done the same thing to his research. And I thought that was really interesting because I just thought he's done the same thing as I, and he hadn't. He'd done the opposing thing. And working it all out, you end up in if you do it well and you put the time in and the years in, you end up concluding at a particular location. And sometimes not many people make it to that location. They drop out, they stick to what they kind of know best and all the comfortable areas. But sometimes there's a lot of uncomfortable areas in this subject. So it's an absolute pleasure to talk to Barry because he's a wealth of information. I'm sure everybody will love it tonight.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. So, as I say, our guest is a person today who has travelled to numerous locations, searching out all things strange and wonderful. Paranormal investigator Barry Fitzgerald. Barry, look, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey, very well, Marcus. Thank you for having me on. And Steve, it's great to see you again.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Yes,
Nice.
absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Now, as I mentioned there that you've travelled to numerous locations, so I think this is a great place to start, Barry. I mean, how important do you think locations actually are in terms of the paranormal world? We know about hotspots and hubs of activity. How important are they, locations themselves?
I think for me, it wasn't necessarily the location, but the people that live at the location. That was important for me to be able to travel, and I did travel the world extensively. And I was able to go to particular areas and speak to the people that live there, and culturally to see. Especially whenever you go to the southern hemisphere and you're speaking to people there, and island people and everything else, and they're having these experiences. Now they call them something completely different, but it was the way the interaction was occurring remained the same, and it was a wake up call for me to suddenly realize, wait a minute, what they're experiencing is exactly what we experience on this island here of Ireland, but yet they're calling it something different. How can that happen on the other side of the world? And that was a unique experience to see. And then then we started looking at the locations themselves, but primarily it was about speaking to the people that lived there first. What are they experiencing, and how are they experiencing it? And that in itself was a valuable aspect, and certainly from Steve and I's work, to be able to see this common thread unfold before us, and be able and to be able to trace that thread was a unique experience, and and an enlightening one as well, if not challenging. But I think, yeah, primarily it was about the people. That's what we had to do first. And there's a saying, good science starts with observation. And today we see very little observation, but taking the time to observe the phenomena, taking the time to speak to the people that observe the phenomena, and stripping away that mask in which most times the phenomena uses to keep itself hidden, stripping away those identities and starting to track it by the way it interacted with us. That led us back hundreds and thousands of years. That was valuable to us.
It's interesting that the kind of more modern, methodologies are not the old boots on the ground, and you really do have to have boots on the ground. Yeah, I mean, I've been to many places with Barry, and when people talk about stuff, at first we're kind of thinking, what are they talking about? Because they've got their own names for things, and but you kind of know in the back of your mind that okay, well, this ticks all the same boxes as somewhere else, but it's just a different name.
Mhm, mhm.
But the phenomena seems to stay the same, and we've traveled all over the world doing different bits and bobs and things and presentations, some good. Some people didn't like some of the stuff we talked about.
No, no.
Well, it is what it is at the end of the day. And it's not a matter because some people have said to me in the past, oh, aren't you the guys that are sort of everything's sort of doom and gloom and everything's bad? And I said, no, no, no. I said, I think what Barry does, as well as me and a number of others, is just level the playing field.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, just put it out on the desk and say, look, this is what this phenomenon represents. Take it as it is. Don't be ignorant and say it's all love and light. And at the same time, don't brush under the carpet all the things that you don't want people to know because it might be a little upsetting. Just put it out and they can make their own mind up. But there are places in this world and countries where they are very, very belief driven, aren't they, Barry? And it's very, very hard to get them to sort of look at the big picture, should we say?
Mhm, mhm.
I mean, it's interesting there. I mean, Barry, you mentioned about the interaction. Now, the interaction is the same. Now, I know that you've done extensive research and your expertise in folklore, particularly Irish folklore, but folklore and mythology. Would you say would you say that's the reason why we see different folklore from around the planet, different creation stories, and why they are essentially appear to be coming from the same source? Not so much because it's coming from perhaps a global civilization, but because they're being driven by the phenomena, as you say, and how it interacts with people at a local level. Would you say that's why we see such similarities in folklore and legends and myths?
The phenomena, the interaction of the phenomena in its truest form can be exceptionally deceptive at times. And that's something that we need to be very, very aware of and very careful with when we're dealing with it. And it's okay to challenge the phenomena when it does manifest. That's perfectly fine. And I certainly don't have an issue with love and light. I have an issue with the other side that certainly does create a problem. And but by exploring this other side and seeing its weaknesses and narrowing in and developing these techniques to try and lessen its effect on us, then we started to look at this other aspect that hid in the love and light. That created this level, Steve says, that it created this level playing field for us to start analyzing this on both sides. And that was very, very important. A lot of the time, whenever we're dealing with a phenomenon, if we do not accept it for all its purposes, if we have one thing that's possibly wrong with it or several, the phenomena stops. It will cut communication. Why? Why? Certainly a few questions for clarity shouldn't cause a problem for something that's trying to establish a line of communication and trust, because trust has to go both ways. But whenever you have something that doesn't and suspects that you're not swallowing the blue pill, that's whenever problems arise, and we see this very dramatic shift and disconnect. And there was a wonderful case there back in Wales, and it was a guy by the name of Evans, and he was a Christian lad, and and he found that when the phenomena approached him, that he had to do everything to the letter, otherwise he would have been immediately cut off. Now, this in itself is a play from the playbook of the original phenomena. Today, things get a little bit murkier because we have technologies that interact and mimic the phenomena that we're creating, which makes it sometimes a little more difficult to try and ascertain what are we dealing with, especially when there's a visual appearance. But for most of the times, we have to be able to question the phenomena. We have to challenge it, and it should be challenging us as well. And because, as I say, there has to be a level of communication and a level of trust that has to be established, and trust should not be given out like that. And when you've got something that's coming along portraying itself to be great Uncle George, we have to really, okay, let's see what this is, and work it. I was in Texas there this year, and I was in a situation where this communication was established, and this phenomenon was coming through with all guns blazing, and it was a wonderful session. It began a wonderful session, but by the end of it, everything that had disclosed was turned on its head by its very purpose. And I said to the people that were sitting in the group, okay, what have we learned from this interaction? Well, it's this, it's this, it's this. And I says, no, we haven't. We have learned absolutely nothing, because there was an exceptional level of deception that was used in this. And I had to point it out. And this is the problem that we have. But when you've got people who are experienced within the field and work with it, sooner or later they're going to arrive at this situation where they say, okay, something's not quite right here. And we like, a lot of the work that Steve and I do now tends to go underneath the radar, because it doesn't fit the paradigm of what the mainstream believes the spiritual world is, of course. But there are other people like us, very, very similar, that do work underneath the radar as well, and are doing tremendous work. And yeah, so that's that. I should shut up now and let Steve talk.
Steve, we'll get your thoughts on that then at that point.
He's absolutely right. And the problem that we have these days is that, not many people are willing to question anything, really. And they think that because they might be communicating with something which is, not, as not a normal thing, they're just quite happy to believe anything, really. And that's quite alarming, to see people take information on board, not question it, and accept it as gospel, as in the absolute truth. But we've even done tests ourselves over the years, and we did an SCP test some years back, and out of 20 people that had what you might refer to as spirit guides, we're communicating regularly with them, and we asked them about information if they had about them, and they basically told us all this stuff about, oh yes, they're here, they live there, he worked at this university, and the names and where, and what they did. Turned out through all the research, none of them were true. But when we asked them afterwards, because they were quite shocked to hear this, have you questioned, or will you question them, why you weren't told the truth? I think most of them come back and said the same thing. The great one-liner was, well, do you want to ask questions, or do you want me to maintain communication? And they were scared to death of losing communication, so they didn't press it. Why is beyond me. And that's that acceptance. People are very easily targeted by phenomena because of that acceptance. And like I say, you have to even question anything or everything that might want to communicate with you, because most of the time when you do the research like Barry's done, it turns out that, well, there's a lot of red herrings, a lot of distruths, and it's only because of the research that you haven't been gullible enough to just accept this as gospel, that they can buckle very quickly, or they don't like it, and they take a step back. All great giving you all this information until you start prying, and that is when the sort of game starts to reveal itself, So it's really interesting how people accept this so willingly.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting. I mean, Barry, what I want to go back to just for a moment there, I mean, we were speaking, funnily enough, me and Steve were speaking about this right before we started about, why do certain people see things? Why do certain people experience things? Would you say it's the phenomenon itself that picks, and not so much that a person might be open-minded or whatever the reason might be, that the phenomena, for whatever reason, picks who will be a conduit, for want of a better word, for the information he wants to give? And off the back of that, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, is there an agenda? And do you feel there's an end game to all this? Or is it just
Hmm.
toying and toying and toying with humanity?
The end game is, to get into that aspect of the end game it would take hours to work down through that rabbit hole. But ultimately, it comes down to he who owns the body wins.
Okay.
And that's a very harsh reality to face. But whenever it comes to, sorry, what was the first part of the
I
question?
was just wondering whether the phenomenon itself picks who will
Oh,
actually
yeah.
experience it.
Yeah. A lot of times it does. In fact, nearly, I would say 99% of the time, we're chosen. We're picked. And the reasons, there are hundreds of thousands of reasons as to why the phenomenon would do that. But there are certain people through the research that we discovered that don't have experiences. And this comes back to, we suspect, this remark that I made at the beginning there, he who owns the body wins. They wish to experience life in totality through the senses of the body. So people who are born blind don't have an experience. They're not targeted. People who are born deaf don't have an experience or are targeted. And very strangely, people who, and this one we're struggling with, people with 20/20 vision are not likely to have an encounter either. And I suspect that during the manifestation, people with 20/20 vision are able to pick out details that the phenomena does not want you to see. It does not want you to concentrate on. So there are the three very weird factors going through this that does warrant more research. And we also, there's this other aspect as well when we look at the likes of meditation. Folks will go through states of meditation, and we have many practitioners that down in the country hall, there's someone who's got a sign up saying, join the meditation group, such and such, blah, blah, blah. But there are actually medical reports that state that 10% of the people who practice normal run-of-the-mill meditation have encounters that can disturb them for the rest of their lives. Now, those are side effects that no one bloody well talks about. And no one comes up with a solution of how to fix it. So that's something I think that we should be aware of, that going into even mundane meditation, we should be aware there is a possibility that you could attract something, and something that can leave a long-lasting effect. So there are things to consider with that. And diet, of course, can also affect how we interact with the phenomena. But we've known this for hundreds of years. During religious orders, they'll go into a type of fasting and the removal of certain minerals and chemicals from the body, of course, allow this phenomena to it opens a door to allow its greater impact to occur. So those are things we have known about for a long time. The meditation certainly was a new one, and to see this unfold, especially when you're looking at psychiatry today, is very certainly not what it was planned to be in the Greek ethos of time, but in the modern sense, it's driven a lot of the time by big pharma and about what drugs can be given to the people, which in itself, more times than not, sedate the problem rather than fix the problem. And what psychiatry sees as first stage psychosis, we see as oppression, and it's a very unique thing, because all of a sudden now science and the world of the paranormal are seeing something, although from different sides of the fence. We're looking at the same thing. The interaction is the same. They call it psychosis, and the medical reports speak about the meditation and note that the amount of people who practice meditation, 10% suffer from first stage psychosis events. which we see as oppressive behavior from this phenomena. And don't call it spirit; it's the phenomena.
Yeah, it consists of a lot of different things. But if you go back in time and you look at, the details about our ancient hands, I mean, in modern times, we live in a poisonous world. What we drink, the air we breathe, our food intake, the transmissions and radiation around us on a regular daily basis. I mean, if you cut all those away and the lifestyle of what we've got now compared to the lifestyle how our ancient ancestors lived, you know, you can understand that. Well, the reasons why they may be that they were more enhanced in some ways of regarding energies. For an example, we know they must have been able to sense these things because they identified these places by building on them or even worshipping at them, in temples, for an example. And it's very interesting why so many are at what are like ascension points or a high altitude points. Now, that isn't by chance neither, but it is interesting that they could have easily been in communications with things even more prominent than what we might be today, because we have to battle our way through in regarding the poisonous world we live in, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating stuff. Can I just come back to you, Barry? You mentioned he who controls the body. Now, I don't want to simplify things or oversimplify things, but obviously it's hard not to evoke images of possession and things of that nature. And when you read accounts of reptilians, and I know even mentioning reptilians is, it evokes silly
Yeah,
images basically,
of
but
course. Yeah,
those kind of accounts, they speak of them using bodies as vessels, of needing them to interact in this world from whatever dimension they're coming from. So is that part of what we're talking about here? This using human bodies as vessels to experience the world. And one thing I'd just like to get your personal point of view on, you were speaking about diet and things like that. I've heard it said a few times that alcohol can make you more susceptible to possession and encounters. Is that something that you've ever come across before?
No.
No, so that's
I certainly have that. I often heard that when someone identifies something that they've encountered, where they drink. I've never, and I've been to the pub many times, and I have never had an encounter with that. I have no idea of anyone who can drink to a certain level where they have hallucination. And I always thought it was a bit daft, to be honest, to go down that particular route, because the phenomenon itself, as I said, there are many different reasons as to why it picks someone, and we should also remember as well, not everything that goes bump in the night is a ghost, not everything that sparkles in the night sky is a UFO. The real phenomena, the true phenomena, the encounters with it is more rare than we think. However, it does happen, and it affects a huge amount of people around the world.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, just to emphasize on that when you talked about possession, I think the best thing what I've learned, and through what Barry's taught me over the how to see through the disguise, is that the best possession cases are those that you question, is it or isn't it? Because that's what they're good at, and they'll leave you thinking, well, is it or isn't it? Everything points to yes, it is, but, and when you've got those buts, it's because it's designed to do so, because it wants you to think, is it or isn't it? And those are the best or probably the most successful. And I am aware, and I know Barry is aware that there are successful. Absolutely.
Now, in regards to the reptilian aspect, in my perspective, of the mask, that is just the same mask that they use as that would come under the premise of demonic, that would come under the premise of jinn, the fairy, spirits of the dead. It's all masks to the core phenomena, and a lot of that can filter around fear. Now, the way that we tend to work with this phenomena is that number one, you have to be very aware of your own instincts. You have to be aware that we all have been born with a gift of discernment. And it's to listen to that and not to be looking at our cell phones thinking, what app is going to help me concentrate on this phenomena? Because no app will help you with this. When the phenomena appears or just before it appears, your body will start reacting. I call it the 20-second rule. Now, when that begins to happen, you will get a release of cortisol and adrenaline and into the system. The hair stands up in the back of your neck. That is your alert signal. If the phenomena is coming through and it is not as it displays itself to be, there is a huge level of deception there. Your body reacts to that deception. You have 20 seconds to be aware of that signal, because after that, then the brain waves start to change. The phenomena actively changes the brain pattern within the observer, and you're moved into a theta band. And that is where we start to have false memory, all of that put into place. So initially, your first encounter, if the phenomena has not got your best interests at heart, will be your fight or flight will engage. That is important to note. And that tells you all you need to know at that particular moment. Now, you can choose to stay there, that's fine, but you're aware of the problem. You're aware that not everything as it seems is as it seems. And you adapt your investigation to suit that. I have been in situations where I've had encounters where there's been no activation, and the encounter has been perfectly harmless and enlightening at the same time. So again, you're getting back to this aspect of dark and light. It's always been there. It's how we interact with it. So that's very, very important.
I've seen it unfold actually. I mean, Barry's a lot more sensitive or acute than I am. Now I do get occasionally those sensations, or the hair goes up, and I kind of do listen to that.
Mhm.
I was listening to that years ago. I mean, when you were actually, I mean, Barry will know this from doing the paranormal research for many years. Paranormal investigators that sometimes get that when going into certain locations, and they use that as a trigger to set up stuff in there or focus on that location
Mhm.
because of that. However, it was a bit misinterpreted back then, as opposed to what it truly represents, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. That
Mhm.
mechanism is an alert mechanism. It's not sort of, oh, you know what, this is a place where you should hang out. So it's how we perceive that. But we've seen this unfold ourselves. In Palm Springs was one location up in the desert mountains there. And before anything, it was beautiful sky, there's nothing there but beautiful stars and stuff in the pitch blackness because no light around. And then I remember Barry saying to me, they're here literally about 30 seconds before they switched on and lit the sky up, and it was a quite a largish object. But you know what? I was like many people, you do get caught up sometimes, and I was a little bit like rabbits in headlights.
Mhm.
And it's easily be done, I'll be honest with you, because sometimes they put a wonderful display of lights on and interaction in certain ways. But it was Barry that actually was nudging me, sort of saying, make sure you take in your 360, because he's always said that. And it's so easy to just put the blinkers on and focus in awe at what you're
Mhm.
looking at
Mhm.
when nothing else exists. It was Barry who was nudging me, saying, look behind, I don't. And of course, we know that from other people there that reaction, that flight or fight was kicking in, and we know that there were things there on the ground. So, and we hot tailed it out of there because I think sometimes you do get the feeling that you may be overstayed your welcome, or there's an opportunity for them, but might not be great for us.
Mhm.
And you think so many people are willing to throw themselves at the phenomena without questioning anything or ignoring the signs. So, like Barry said, you know that mechanism's there for a reason, and learning how to understand it, is it takes time. I get it, and like I thought many years ago, it was an indicator to, oh, great, I'm picking up that this is the location we need to be focusing in on. When it's my mechanism saying, just because you don't see it or hear it might not be good. Get the hell out of Dodge.
Yeah.
It's how you see it, how you perceive it.
There's another thing about human nature and I've seen it time and time again, that we're attracted to the macabre. And I regard a lot of the phenomena through this particular premise. And there's the analogy of if we're driving down the road and we've got this beautiful sandwich in our hand, from Subway or whatever, and we're minding our own business and we're enjoying the moment, and all of a sudden, further down the road, we see something that's lying dead, a deer or a badger or whatever the case may be, whatever animal is lying on the side of the road. And we've still got this beautiful sandwich in our hand. We think, oh, no, 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 don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look. Then we look. And I regard the phenomena as in a term just known as roadkill. And going into this phenomenon now, years later, and something begins to happen, I do center myself and I ask that question, is this roadkill? And I listen for that answer. And if I get a yes, that's it. I'm done. Don't need to know. And head off in another direction.
It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, and there's numerous accounts, whether it's alien abductees or people who have, experienced hauntings. And me and Steve have spoke about this in the past as well, where you just kind of feel a sudden surge of absolute terror. Steve, we were speaking about, not being frightened, just pure terror. I mean, I've woken up myself and felt this, and I've known it's beyond a dream. Like you say, you kind of move to a different room, or you bring yourself awake, or whatever you do. So, I mean, without wanting to, I know you can't, there's no black and white answer, but it seems to me that many people could be experiencing this, more people than people would actually think on a daily basis.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of people who are experiencing globally. And, there's a common weakness within the phenomena we find, especially with symptoms such as that became known today as the old hag attack, or the incubus and succubus from the medieval period. We keep pushing that back right into Babylon, and you find these references to these particular creatures. And what we discovered is that a lot of the times, 9 times out of 10, they tend to attack females more so than males. And that's because of the iron count within their systems. Iron is their weakness. And they will wait until the female enter their monthly cycle and they become anemic. That's when they strike. And even in psychiatry, it's known that low iron levels will allow phenomena to manifest within their patients. So again, we're looking at a weakness within our iron, and how this is manipulated by the phenomena to get what they want. And so it's up to us to take this back and say, okay, what are we consuming? What are we eating and drinking that's having an effect on us? And understanding who we are, what this meat suit needs, and that's very important. Now, for a long time, the phenomena stopped its interaction. I thought it was like, oh, I must have annoyed it some way, and that was that, until I discovered that no, my iron levels were too high, and through blood work, and so that was corrected, and what do you know, it starts to happen again. So they stayed away, and partially because of that is because of oxidization. The elements that they're using to manifest is directly affected by oxidization between the ultraviolet and the iron. So that causes an issue. That does not happen when you go underground. Once you rob the UV from the atmosphere, then that's a different kettle of fish. And but I tend to stay away nowadays. I'm getting older. I tend to stay away from the caves and everything else. And Steve, you've been over here, and we've been doing things here, and standing on the edge of a cave. Just after the sunset, we have this woman call to us from the cave in a language that we have never actually ever heard before. Couldn't recognize what it was.
Yeah.
But it was, it happens. I've even filmed and photographed this phenomena as it manifests on the mountainside, which, from an Irish perspective, we would say that's the fairy. Now, not Tinkerbell, that's a Disney thing. They're very, very different when they manifest, but it was through the rocks. These things were manifesting through the rocks, and that's a very important factor to counter on, because we tend to find the phenomenon in its rawest form manifesting in, above, or on rock. And when you look at the work from the likes of David Paulides across the United States, where he has wrote those wonderful books, Missing 411, David's work corresponds with our work. And David has even admitted himself, the majority of these people are disappearing in boulder fields. And where David has got these key areas, where you've got bunches of people disappearing, they also correspond with the work that we were doing with the satellite data.
Right.
So our work crosses into his work, and his work crosses into ours, and this goes for many different investigative fields, cryptozoology, ufology. It all crosses in through. There's a web and a thread that weaves its way through this phenomenon, and if you can track it, oh my God, the world's going to open up into a different perspective for you.
We do seem to have these spikes of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at society today and I think, most people's immune system is shot, really are these days.
Yeah.
If it's not through certain, things that they've had through medications or whatever, even the supplements in the food that we try and get out of the food, that modern day food is just hardly there. We don't know it. It might look great, it might taste great, but the actual the real good stuff that's inside proper natural food, would have given us a clear body, a chance to beat off these things and level the playing field, good iron in the body, that sort of thing. But right across the board now, we just see so much immunity problems and deficiencies that people aren't even aware that, they even have this. To be honest with you, just go through living life like that, but I clearly go back in time, it mustn't have been like that, many, many years. Though that phenomenon has been around as long as I can remember, to be honest with you. But I do see like there is sometimes patterns of rising in phenomena taking place. And I often think, well, okay, what are the changes? Well, one of the biggest changes is how we live now, and do we really get the nourishment the body requires from good, homegrown, proper food? Rather than it just end up in a plastic box or something, which leaches into the food anyway. So yeah, it's difficult times, and I do think there's like Barry's saying, geological, environmental, and I think we have a part to play in that, and I think that deficiencies in immunities and things like that is a big issue for modern day man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, touching on the missing 411, and I'm sure as you mentioned about crossovers and connections. These same cluster spots of people disappearing, and also UFO hotspots. There's lots of Bigfoot reports there. I think now it'd really be a good time, because you said you mentioned you noticed these connections, and I know Steve would probably like to speak about this too. I think it'd be a great time to speak about Project Doorway and what really got that started. Why did that come about? What's the not what you hope to achieve? That sounds really silly, but where do you see Project Doorway going? How did that start?
Well, Project Doorway in itself was developed to look at these particular key areas, to study them, to study the phenomena that was manifesting from there, and then we started identifying other aspects as well. So it wasn't just the phenomena that was coming through; there were historical details that we needed to take into account as well, archaeological aspects that were coming in. And then there were encounters, of course, that people were having. Locals in the area was also important. Then we looked at the magnetic anomalies, the satellite data. All of this all tied in to create a better picture, and we were able to see the targets that we would be looking for. It's not just a case of, oh, there's a magnetic anomaly there. Yeah, that must be where the phenomenon is happening. Let's go. No, there's more than that. And when the other key points are met, That's whenever Project Doorway is very interested in that location. And that has borne fruit already. Last year we were in the Pyrenees, and it was exceptionally successful. Now we can't get into the details of what was discovered there, but I can tell you this: that I have never ever seen the details of the discovery anywhere else, and that's something we're going to be discussing during on Saturday at the Awakening events. We have a particular lecture called Off the Record, where we will be presenting what we discovered. There's some things that we can't mention in the public domain, but it will be mentioned there, and the evidence will be shown.
Yeah, it's like any good scientific. If you're dealing with any scientific department and you're looking to theorize about certain aspects and unfold a mystery here, which is primarily what we were doing, is that the first thing they're going to say to you is, well, have you tested the theory? Test the hypothesis. So in other words, what you got to do is you got to do the remote, you got to do the opposite. You got to go to that location then and prove your hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's been done.
Boots needed to be on the ground, and this is something that Project Doorway is about. We can't the stuff that we can't do from the internet. We have to get from behind a computer. We have to get boots on the ground. But the problem being, as of course, as well, that we discovered at one location, that it can have a physical effect on your being too close. And of the three that went, the three ended up ill, and its effect was it stretched for a long time. So there are concerns for that as well. So, but again, those are things that we're not going to read about in a book. These are things that we have to experience. We have to understand what's going on, and it was a phenomenal experience. But it's not the only place. We know that using, for instance, just the satellite data, there are thousands of locations that could meet the requests of Project Doorway, looking for the phenomena in which it comes through, and all of that, and more to the point, what is coming through. And we see these areas as well that will target dogs, man's best friend. And there's a location here in Ireland that I'm very well aware of. I was on the location, and it had targeted the 4 German Shepherd guard dogs that were on location, and it murdered all 4. And I'm aware of other locations as well that where there were tales of dogs being turned inside out, and no one heard a thing about this. No one heard the animals being targeted. Now we suspect the work that Stephen and I are doing. They target the dogs first, not because the dogs have this extrasensory perception. No, the dogs sense the smell. A dog's smell is much, much heightened than a human's. And there's a particular smell with the phenomena when it first manifests, which will dissipate quickly in the wind, that we sometimes and most times lose. But the dogs don't. They will alert us first that there's a problem. And they take the dogs out first.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. It's grave and ominous, but it's absolutely fascinating. I mean, just a quick one. I mean, you mentioned about them targeting dogs. There's multiple animal mutilation, should I say, and even human mutilations. Are we looking at the same? Is the phenomena responsible, or is this something entirely different?
There is a phenomena associated with that, but there are particular samples that are being taken from the animals that look at this aspect of the mucosa. And the mucosa, of course, is the first defense to the body. The moment that the body feels attacked by viral or bacterial aspects, the mucosa will develop quickly. But they're targeting these particular areas. They're looking for the way in. And of course, those tests have been going on. Now, not all of this phenomena is but should belong to the phenomena. There's a lot that we are doing ourselves, and of course covering our tracks from that. And the idea that we are producing phenomena is a perfect example is the New Jersey drones that were flying last year, and of course the whole world was in the hoop. Oh my God, Chinese balloons are now a UAP. Well, I'm sorry, but I can spot a balloon and I can call a balloon whenever I see a balloon. I don't need this other stupid agenda that's unfolding, and the technology was being broken out and disguised under the original phenomena. And we can see that from the data now. We can see where the money was going, and who was up for the contract award, which followed after that. So New Jersey was a bust, and other places were just as bad. So there is this rhetoric which is being delivered to the population, which is covering big business, and then there is the true phenomena, and the true phenomena is very, very different.
Right, Steve, what are your thoughts on that?
Confusing times, isn't it? I mean, we talk about New Jersey. I looked at some of the stuff, and when it must maybe the first state turned up on the scene, it looked to be the phenomena. But then, within 48 hours, the skies were full of both, and that was the confusing factor. People saying, "Oh my God, it's over military bases." Well, that's because they came from. You know, you have the president said, "I'm going to get the truth," and he never gets anything.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact that the FAA cleared them. And the biggest thing about this, it's very clever, actually, psyop in a way. It's a psyops in a sense, because you got some things up there in the sky that, yeah, you know what? 300,000 people in New Jersey are going to see this. What are we going to do? Get our own toys out there. FAA comes forward and says, we cleared them all. So basically everyone says, oh, well, how good at that is diluting the situation. Oh, they're all ours. I think maybe 1% might not have been, but I think the skies were. Every little toy came out, and you can imagine it's like watching that film, years ago, the little UFOs that, that all look different, and all those ones turned up at the end. There was thousands of those things, all different, and this is what causes the problem because people can't identify. They build them that way, I think, on purpose because it causes confusion and absurdities. And people thought, oh, well, if the FAA's cleared them, we've got some wonderful toys. And then it dies a death. Nobody's asking any questions like, well, hang on a second, who's with it? If we've got them, what sort of technology is it? It's surprising how quick good stuff just dies and to find out anything.
Yeah, I mean, for real. I mean, speaking about the New Jersey sightings, I mean, I like to get anyone's opinion who's spent any time in UFO circles on this. So, I mean, Barry, UAP disclosure, as it's called.
Oh, don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't feel we're any further forward than we were 5 years ago. I don't feel we're going to be further forward in 5 years' time than we are now. How do you feel about that? And why make the fuss if it's clear that they're not actually going to disclose anything, in your opinion?
I think, if anything, what it has done has exposed a group of people who should not be followed at all.
Okay.
And this idea of I have a person who knows a person who knows a person, no, that is absolute trash. The fact that there is no information being relayed to the public and it's all allegory, absolutely not. Grill these people and understand that they are there for a particular reason which does not serve us. And that's the way I would weigh those things up. There was nothing of any use to any researcher anywhere around this planet with stories of, well, my friend, who's a friend, who's a friend, who's a friend, saw this. Nonsense. Absolute, utter nonsense.
Steve, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I mean, just the research that Barry's got and I've got is better than what they're producing at the Pentagon level.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at stuff and saying, well, that's, some of the early stuff they were putting out there, we know was fake. Yeah, it's still sort of utilize. Why don't you use the good stuff? We've got, if you don't got it, come to us. I'll provide it. Barry will provide it. Got some great stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're using a real lucky, crappy stuff that they're going to throw out there. And nobody, he's right, nobody really came up with anything. There are, unfortunately, a group of profiteers, that's the best way I can describe it, in this. And we know this started right back at the TTSA when that first started. In fact, it was the TTSA kind of kicked all this off before the Pentagon hearings, and it was it was foul right from beginning. And but unfortunately, the whole system designed in the US that the media are on board and this, that, and the other, and you're going to get a lot of this. People claiming to be the spokesman for the people or for the media in regarding absolute rubbish that they're talking about, and proven so. And when they're pulled, they just disappear under a rock for a little bit, and then they come back out flying guns again with more lies. The problem is that they're not designed to get information from these events, from these public hearings.
Mm.
Because if anything, if it ever gets close to something, they put the stamp on it, national security, red tape goes across it. It can only be talked in a skiff, and nobody will ever find out anything. So what is the point? It's like just a dead end.
I seen this particular person back in March who really put their neck on the line when they said that they were in communication with the Galactic Federation and that the motherships were going to appear and give a date. And I said, "Oh, you did not, did you?" And of course, they did not appear. Now, this person was absolutely lambasted. Now, I've got this person in two camps. Either they're delusional or they've been played by the phenomena. Now, we do see the phenomena doing this. It'll use people and lie to them, and then they'll go and do what they're doing. But it did not happen, and they disappeared behind a paywall where their supporters can continue to support. But here's the problem. Here is a perfect example of the deception that can unfold when dealing with the phenomena. And if it has lied to you once, my God, it's going to lie to you again and again and again and again. Why are we listening to that? And so that just absolutely amazed me. So when I hear the Galactic Federation, I turn it off. I said, "That's it. I'm out. I'm gone."
Yeah, I mean, there's like you say, at the minute, there's such crazy talk on all sides. Well, not on all sides, crazy talk flying about, but it's also like intermingled with like little nuggets of truth. But you mentioned there about these people that they're either delusional or they've been played by the phenomena. I find it interesting. We were speaking to somebody not long ago, and we were talking about the elite and how the elite, whoever they might be and whoever you might define them, are
Mm-hmm.
perfectly aware of the phenomena as well, and even maybe
Oh yeah,
using
yeah,
it to
yeah.
their own ends. So,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
so I mean, how many of these people are? I know we're getting into conspiracy territory, but how many of these people are working for the elite who are working for the phenomena? Is it beyond opportunism? Have they got their own agenda here?
There are agendas, yeah. And but the people that you would think are the elite are not the elite. The names of those people you will never hear. I'm aware of some. I understand what they do, and it's very different. Yes, the phenomena goes hand in hand with that. In fact, we tend to see the industrial complex also go hand in hand with the phenomena. You see, when you start looking at the negative magnetic anomalies, you have the other side of the coin, where we tend to see, I believe it is 70% of the world's top suicide locations, or 75% of the world's top suicide locations, appear in negative anomalies. You've got this attraction to pull people to those areas. You also have these areas within there that our ancestors were using as well for sacrifice. Now, bear in mind, sacrifice was much smaller then. You had one or two people, unless, of course, you were the Mayan kingdom, which was disaster. But you have these key areas where our ancestors were sacrificing various bits and pieces, and that's another interesting key point as well. In when we're referring to the gods and everything else, this aspect of the gods weren't necessarily attracted to vegetables and fruit that were plucked from a tree. They were attracted by the sweet smell of sacrifice. That tells you all you need to know, and we really should be reevaluating reevaluating those followers. But we also find that 70% of the world's top military weapons development also occurs in negative magnetic anomalies. Now, we already know we've got paperwork here of airline companies who were also into weapons development, and the paperwork is black and white. It discloses how they were trying to make communications with aliens, and trying to develop new weapons of mass destruction and engine designs and everything else. And clearly, when I'm going through the report, I've got a red marker going, no, 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 no. I'm seeing all the taglines, which really shows what they're dealing with. But because these people didn't have the experience with it, they didn't see it. So they're playing along. And another thing, they were using a Ouija board on company money to make contact with aliens. What self-respecting alien is going to use a Ouija board? No, folks, that doesn't happen. The Ouija board is vague. It's governed many times by dyslexic spirits, and that can be a problem. But when you're dealing with the phenomena at that level of company money and everything else that's being pumped into these projects, we really got to question what the hell is going on and why is this happening. There are agendas there, of course. We're well versed to the agendas, and we're well versed to many of the people who use those to their ends. But it's not for us. It's for the upper echelon because it benefits them better.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you must have some thoughts on that. I mean, because it's, this has been banded around for decades, this kind of thing of an elite group, and, we never really know who they are. Yeah, it's tied into this paranormal phenomena, basically. I mean, what are your thoughts then?
I think, it's still happening today. I actually sent a Barry over a video today, and we're still seeing it in the hierarchy of those which are famous. And it's still, as the days of going back to the worshipping of Moloch, and it tends to be a certain people, and it must be. I often think to myself, well, what have they got to gain? And it must be probably something to gain. Maybe it's just success. Maybe it's just wealth. Maybe it's just greed. But whatever it is, it does seemingly serve a purpose, because we have the latest sorts of bits of information is that it's been utilized, these ritualistic type practices, even at the highest level of NASA, the rocket program, where they've been utilizing ritualistic practices to maybe communicate with things that might have assisted them over the years, with engineering, with rocket science, getting to space, whatever. And it is within their realm to pay homage. In fact, they've gone one further and even said, we have to respect the sponsors. I mean, what the hell? And when you talk to the people, or when you research this information, you think, well, it's one of two things have happened. They've conversed with something. It could be what might be referred to as a deity. It could be that it's some strange being in a cave. It could be all sorts of different weird and strange things that they communicated with, obtained information, and it's been useful. Not all of it, but parts of it, because they don't tend to ever give you a full picture. And then the other side is it's people that are having downloads, people that obtain the most amazing calculations or engineering geniusm from downloads or in dreams, and Barry will explain what about the word about geniusm. Genius.
Yeah. That of course filters back to the Middle Eastern connection with the jinn. So, and it's a strange world we live in.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I mean, it's interesting, like you say, as genius and going back to Jin and people experiencing downloads of information. I mean, some of these downloads, you think of people such as Leonardo, Da Vinci, Tesla, possibly, um, and some of this information results or could be for the betterment of humanity. So, are we talking about a phenomena here that's as two? Is it one phenomena with two sides? Is it one phenomena with one agenda? Or are we talking of two separate forces? I mean, I know you probably can't answer that in a 2 or 3 minute answer, but I mean, what are your thoughts on that, Barry? And
Well, let's give it a go.
okay,
It's the same phenomenon, but it's two sides of the same coin. This battle we've been told time and time again, throughout our heritage, black versus white, yin versus yang, good versus evil, all of this work that's been going on. This was never our fight. That's its fight. That was never our war, but we've been dragged into it, and that has been going on for eons of time. And where we see people who begin cultivating aspects of the phenomena to the phenomena's benefit within certain anomalies. After a period of time, we see this crushing effect from the opposite side, which will distill that, and that's we see that time and time again. But that's the way it is. I think people lose sight in the fact that it's coming from outer space, it's coming from another dimension. Not what we're seeing. This is here. This has been here for a very long time, and yeah, again, that rabbit hole was very deep, and it rests on the bookshelf in another book.
I'm with you, Steve. What are your thoughts on that? You must have some thoughts to give on that as well.
Oh, we're dealing with a phenomenon. It's age old. It's always been here. I think the ruse has been the fact that we, come up with some idea years ago as to where are these things coming from. Well, it had to be the most obvious thing at the time, which is, they're coming from other planets, traveling the vast distances of space, and we have that hypothesis then it bled into films, and but that narrative has been running for God, how many years now? People say 70 or 80, but it's actually longer, because if you look at the 1908 Aurora crash or something like that? I mean, that hypothesis was there then. So it's been going on for over 100 years and plus, but comes a time now, because there are people like Barry and myself and others that are working quietly behind the scenes, coming up with some very interesting data that opposes the narrative. And the thing is, at some point, you've got to consider a narrative change, even if it's just to point out the fact that, well, we're not calling them ETs anymore, and we're not calling them extraterrestrial. We're calling them interdimensional. We're going to call them NHI. We're going to change the name from UFO because it's the old, it's linked to the old narrative, and we're going to call it UAP, which is kind of came across in meteorological studies years ago. They used to use that terminology all the time, but it encompasses so much more, because there's so much more to UFOs. Most of the time in 1950s, if you said UFO, people just say flying saucer. But they're not. They're every feasible shape, every feasible size. Sometimes not solid. Sometimes there seem to be light, which is intelligent. So are they a living thing, or is it a sentient craft? It's all the above. So now you got UAP fits better than just UFO, because people just thought it was a nuts and bolts craft, and that's kind of where that terminology comes from, that era. But we're not in that era anymore, and people aren't just swallowing that big pill all the time, because the evidence points to there's too much going on here at planet Earth than any traffic passing backwards and forwards. So
I think it really is driven home when we consider that encounters with aliens during the abduction phenomena, we're here for your betterment. We're here because it's going to affect. If you destroy the planet, it'll affect the whole universe. What BS are they talking? Why would an alien life form be interested in what goes on in this planet unless you're already here.
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
they don't want you to disrupt what is already here. And humanity seems is very good at disrupting things. But again, that's neither here or there. But it's a question that really should be studied. Why are they interested in the planetary development from another planet unless they're already here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I say people have said this, even if they believe that they are actually aliens from another world. Many people have said that they have indeed been here for thousands, many thousands of years. Now, I mean, these UFO alien encounters, as you say, go back much further than the modern UFO era, much further than the 40s. Um, I understand that you're really quite up there with early Irish UFO encounters. I wonder if you could speak to me about some of those, and not just UFOs, but any alien encounters and how they kind of feed
Oh,
into what's going on still today.
well, you've got the Tales of the Iron Mountain, a place I know by the back of my hand, where you had the ancient Irish gods, the Tuatha De Danann, who came in their lofty ships and landed on the mountain in the middle of a storm. You don't land a waterborne ship and on the top of a mountain. Um, and this was around, let me see now, that time period would have been around 1500 BC
Wow.
when this occurred. Now this particular mountain is known for the phenomenon, and historically there have been stories of strange lights being seen, ancient worship occurring on the side of the mountain. Again, we're looking at rocks here, folks. It's about the rocks. It's about the doorways that open within the rocks, and this phenomena enters and exits. And phenomena in which, again, instead of one or two people who appear on the side of this mountain road, hundreds of people are appearing and disappearing. And that doesn't only happen in Ireland. I'm aware of another case in England where on top of a mountain pass, hundreds of soldiers, ancient soldiers, have been witnessed tracking this particular mountain pass and heading off. And it's not just Ireland. But again, what I'm trying to stipulate here and point out is the direct connection to the rocks. That's very important to understand. And when we look at Steve's heard me mention this, it's a pet hate of mine, the shining ones. And when they manifest, a perfect example of that was back in the 1800s, where in France you had this young girl who a very religious young girl, and she watched this entity walk out from the cave, and she didn't know who it was, but of course, by the time the church got the hold of it, it was all manipulated and molded and fitted into a particular story, and it's the Virgin Mary that she was seeing. And next thing, these stonemasons were carving the Virgin Mary, and this young girl, Bernadette, looked at it and said, "What's that?" And they said, "Well, this is what you saw. This is the Virgin Mary." I said, "That's not what I saw." Those were her words in her diary. And whenever it comes down to it, you've got hundreds of thousands of people who end up going to Lourdes every year, worshiping at a site, trying to connect with a phenomenon that wants to be worshipped. And bearing in mind that Bernadette was afraid when she saw the phenomenon, her body was reacting. And in her words, she referred to it in her diary as that thing. Those were
Yeah.
her words.
Made her a saint, I believe, didn't they?
They made her a saint, and of course now it's big business. But
Yeah.
we've got to be careful about what we're worshipping, and be careful of the rocks.
Yeah. It goes on all over the world, in Africa, in India, in ancient caves, in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
Middle East, and because one day some shepherd walked past and saw something which was not described as human.
Mm-hmm.
And like many cultures do, they they give it a name, they give it a face in the sense of speaking of being a deity or some sort. And before you know it, they're praying to another god, because it's remarkable how many gods I mean, just India alone has 3 million gods. Can you believe that? 3 million, because they just got every name, everything. But these things now become holy caves and are visited by hundreds of thousands of people on a regular basis to pray to. But they don't even know what they're praying to. That's the thing. It's kind of something that's just been thrown together and worked out. And there are many of these places all over the world. Interestingly, though, caves seem to keep popping up on the scene, don't they,
Mhm,
Barry?
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I mean, like I find that fascinating that we keep mentioning rock because, like you say, there's multiple UFO, famous UFO sightings on mountains, caves come up a lot in history. I wonder what your thoughts are about certain temples, old megalithic buildings. There seems to be a concentration of quartz crystal and that kind of rock used, alabaster rock. Are these used on purpose to attract the phenomena, or are we really looking at just natural rock formations as opposed to
Mm.
temples?
Well, this is where it gets complicated because it doesn't matter the rock. Um, it will manifest through, but it has to be unhewn rock. When you got a temple that's built and carved and beautifully represented, the phenomena tends to stop. So it's the unhewn places, the places that have not been carved, and that's where we tend to see the phenomenon. This is certainly manifesting more readily than anywhere else.
Steve, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting stuff. That I mean, so would you say that a lot of, I don't know, maybe get your thoughts on this, Barry, as well after Steve? Would you say a lot of the ancients built on sites of this inhuman rock, even though they might have stopped the phenomenon in itself, but initially there was something there on a lot of these sites. The temples have been built on and upon and upon over the course of history. And what are your thoughts on that, both? If we start with you, Steve.
I think that some places may have been, things have been built, afterwards, onto those locations. But then there are some key locations which we've talked about, Solomon's Temple, for an example. Barry will probably explain a bit more about that. But these places are all over the world. Many of them are in specific geological locations, which we still don't understand about, the Earth grid and how they may have known about, certain energies that do flow into certain locations, and suddenly there's another ancient site there, with some remnants that, there's a reason for why they point towards in certain directions. But I won't go into that because Barry will cover that. But yes, I do believe some have a reason to be there. And we're looking at these temples and going, oh well, they must have known. Well, you've got to consider it may have been this natural thing, like Barry's talking about, that took place there, and then they go and build a temple, and we think, oh, it's because of them, it's because of the temple, and they must have recognized this location. But they could have been something that took place there prior, and then they go and stamp it and represent it by building a temple to it at that location. But like I say, we've looked at a few of these things, and Barry's certainly got some information on these places.
Well, so certainly from an Irish perspective, we've seen that when Christianity came to the island, they came empty-handed, and they really didn't offer us anything because we already had an island rich in gods and goddesses and everything else. But as a stamp of authority, as showing a more superior path, if you like, a lot of those older areas were destroyed and built on by the new church. And church in itself, of course, is derived from kirk, and kirk from the Greek, which is, when you follow it all back, it's about forming circle, to commune. And so that was a key point from certainly the Irish perspective, as seeing these particular areas which were beneficial sometimes, for the people. And yes, we could talk about Solomon's Temple, but what we discovered about that, and probably will get us shut down. So we'll leave that one alone. Um, but there are definite connections to the old phenomenon.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. Look, guys, we probably should start thinking about wrapping this up. We could go on for forever. So Barry, I think where we should probably end this is, where do you see paranormal research going in the future? There seems to be more and more people from different fields of interest starting to work together. You said it yourself, starting to come to the same conclusions from different perspectives and different angles. Do you see? Do you see? Do you believe there'll be more effort from different fields of interest moving forward as we treat the phenomena as a phenomena and not different fields of interest? So we're not just looking at UFOs, we're not just looking at cryptids, we're looking at one thing. How do you think research and investigations up?
It's something that needs to happen. Will it happen? I'm not so sure. Uh, on the surface, we have particular groups and organizations that are out for giggles, and they're out for that quick fix, that quick encounter, not understanding that there can be ramifications from that.
Mm.
And that's something, a more seasoned investigator will look at and roll their eyes and get back to what they're doing. But there is a change occurring, certainly within the more settled areas of study, which is now recognizing this same source aspect. And there are people out there who are reticent about the fact that, no, this is impossible, this does not work. The data speaks for itself, and that's a very, very important understanding there. And I think as time goes on, I hope that we have a generation who is going to come along and take over, because Steve and I, as you can see, there's gray here, there's gray in Steve's beard, and we're getting older, and we need good people to come behind us. And I'm concerned whenever I switch on the TV and see these shows. It does not bode well.
It doesn't. No, you're absolutely right. I often think about that. It's a different society today than it was when you and I started back.
Mm-hmm.
Most people just, it's hard to get them into the subject the right way, in a sense of
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
To educate them not to wander off the path into the entertainment, into the circus side of
Mm-hmm.
things. Very easy to get caught up in that. And a lot of people like that entertainment factor, but this is just, as long as you remain in your mind, it's entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Real research is going out there. You're not likely to get much entertainment out of that. So they don't see TV shows based on the real good stuff. Very, very, to be honest. But you are right. I mean, it's a difficult time. And I think as we move forward, I think the only advance is that we've got some very clever toys now. And now we can even have things built. I think that's a positive. If you go back in the days, we hardly have anything, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think technological wise is an advancement. Internet can be a good thing. It can be a very bad thing, because it's just like the government. There's a lot of disinformation on the internet, which is inaccurate or not true, or even fake news, So we're always finding things ourselves, and we kind of work through it. And we go, yep, that's fake, and we kind of suss it. But you know what? We'll sit back and watch the months go by, watch everybody else run it as authentic, And when we first started putting stuff out, it was a big pill for swallowing. I mean, we were saying things and we were having raised eyebrows and no way is it that and this, that, and the other. But we get proven that we're right. And it gets hammered home by another proof and another proof. And eventually people go, do you know what? I might have said that 6 years ago, but we were absolutely right. We were spot on. And the thing is, people have to kind of digest that and realize that, what they're hearing and what they're seeing isn't very true, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I've caught the eye. I mean, Barry's work and what we've done together has caught the eye of some high places where they want to know who we are and what we know and what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we've gone through that, and quite happy to say that it's either, the research is not you might have come to the same conclusions, but we did as well through the But yeah, they show an interest, and there is a kind of a party of people that seem to know our stuff, because when you get a chance to talk to some of them, they kind of realize, they talk about it and they go, oh yeah, yeah, kind of know what you
Mhm.
guys, your research is doing. So we're not the only ones on the chessboard, but like I've said to them, and this does happen, that we're not sanctioned. We're quite happy to deliver the information to the public when we want to deliver it to the public, without the worry that we're under a time basis that, oh my God, you can only keep it confidential and you can't talk about it or put it out in the public until you get the nod two,
Mhm.
3 years down the road, or when their plan says you can put bits out. Well, we're not under that. So, and I think that was a little concern for them, because, sometimes to them, we probably see we jump the gun and get it out to the public sometimes before they've even managed to do it. And I don't think they kind of like that sometimes. But like I say, we don't work for the government, even though we get asked if we work for the government. you know,
I was in a meeting. It was a lunch meeting, and it was stated to me, Barry, we love the work that you're doing. Excuse me, and we really would like to make you realize that there's a lot of money for your projects, and we want to support your projects, but we want you to toe the line. That was the end of the lunch. I said, no, no, goodbye, and I left. And but that's it. The field is full of this as well. So, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby, look, I'd like to thank you because I've found this conversation absolutely fascinating,
Thank
eye-opening.
you.
It's no problem. I know I'm going to finish this conversation and I'm going to go and get Deception of Gods and Men. I want to read that now more than I did 90 minutes ago. So, what have you got coming up, Barry? I know you're talking at the conference this weekend. Have you got any other projects? The floor is yours, my friend.
Well, I'm over in New Orleans, and in November, so I'll be researching over there, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to. And then I have another a speaking engagement there in Belfast in Northern Ireland, on in June. So I'm looking forward to delivering a lot of information there, to the fellows and ladies of this fine land. And yeah, outside of that, Steve and I were working on a book, and it's pretty much done. It's sitting on the shelf, um, and it's breathing. I think that's a good way to let it be, and see how things unfold. Because when we release that, that's going to change a lot. And are we ready for that?
I know.
And so there's things that we need to look at and value. And there's a lot of work went into it. But if it's not ready, well then it's not ready.
No, I feel a bit like Oppenheimer. We created something, but we don't want to give it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So I look forward to reading that. I mean, Steve, it's been a brilliant 90 minutes. It really has been a bit of a journey on this. I mean, what are
Hey,
your thoughts?
I've loved it. I mean, people can get hold of by it's not charmstealer.net, is it charmstealer.org now? Is it
Oh, they'll reach me through the Awakenings. That's the best place for them to, or
Awakening.
the Facebook.
Oh yeah, of course, I've got it all in there. Awakenings events. .co.uk can find out everything about Barry. You can reach out to him about there, and all the things that we kind of do, including Project Doorway, which is also about looking into having people be able to join some of the expeditions, and also to take part in some of the experiments as well. So you can find out more on the website about that and how to go about it. So check it out at awakeningsevents.co.uk. And like I say, we have an event coming up on Saturday, and I'm sure that's going to be the start of many to come. And it's a complete sellout, which just goes to show that people want good information. It's about good information now. It's not about seeing a new face and the same old stuff. People are, I've always found the British people to be a little bit more engaging and a bit more thoughtful about the topic. and I'm glad of that. But it's also about that people are realizing that we've become a bit stagnant, the subject in certain areas, and it does need to expand. And of course, there are people pushing forward, ourselves included, to try and bring this new information out and new information forward. Like I say, I think the general public are kind of realizing that now, and are crying out, "Where's all the new stuff? I don't want to hear something from 10 years ago." You know what I mean? And this is exactly what this event does. Our events are about focusing on good material, and that's what matters. It doesn't matter whose research it is; it's a matter of what research has been done. So we're really looking forward to that, and we'll be hearing more about that as the days go on.
Excellent. Steve, look, it's been a blast as usual. Barry, it's been absolutely fascinating. As I say, thank you ever so much for joining us. We really do appreciate that. And that just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments. Follow us on social media. Subscribe to our channel. And make sure you check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for updates, news, and articles. Until next time, goodbye and take care.